Hey, still in cousins. You already know. You already know what time it is. Na, 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 na. Animated horror stories. Na, na, na. Animated horror stories. Doom, doom, doom. Doom, doom, doom. Ba-doom. I am still sick. That's why I wasn't hitting them notes. You hear it? Sounds crazy. Sounds gross. But let's get into it. Where we at? We at our cousin's SSG Animation's house. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Um, we love a good restaurant horror story. So we at KFC. KFC Horror Stories Animated. I think we've been here before. If we have, I'll tag it at the end. If we haven't, I'll tag Popeyes. You know? But I think we've been here before. So I'm excited. As I always say, if you want to, feel free to go watch their videos on their channels because, as you see, this is from 3 weeks ago. You know, you know. So yeah, it's from 3 weeks ago. If you want to watch something that they posted today or yesterday, you can feel free to go watch it with them. Make sure you come watch it with me when I decide to watch it. But I'm showing y'all stuff you ain't seen. But let's get into it. Please grab a blunt, grab a bottle of water, grab a bag of chips, and grab a blanket so you can stay snug. Okay? Okay, let's get up in here.
What was the most dangerous work accident you have ever experienced? I must admit, I am a bit clumsy. Several times I dropped oil or got electrocuted for a second for not drying my hands properly. All were normal things that could happen. All except one. That time it wasn't an accident, and it almost cost me my life.
What do you mean it was no
To be
accident?
honest, this was not a one-day thing. I had to have seen the signs that I was in danger over time, but to tell you the truth, my innocence and impulsiveness worked against me. The first day it all happened, I was walking into my job at KFC.
Mm-hmm.
I was a relatively new employee, but there were a few newer employees than me.
Okay.
I nonchalantly got out of my car and headed towards the restaurant until I saw him. There was a man dressed as Colonel Sanders sitting in one of the chairs outside, eating from a bucket of fried chicken. Upon seeing me, the man just stared at me, offering me a piece of chicken with a tetric smile.
No.
Somewhat uncomfortable, I ignored him and kept walking. I told my boss, and he, although surprised, said he was probably a joker. I decided to listen to him and continue working. The next day, the man was still there. Again, he was eating chicken, but this time, there was something different. This time, he was waiting for me, looking at me with his eyes. When he found me, he put down the bucket and stood up, walking towards me slowly.
No.
It may have just been a man disguised as Colonel Sanders, but the way he walked, the smile he had on his face as he did so, the whole combination was genuinely theatrical. Frightened, I ran inside the restaurant. As I reached the door, the man stopped, turned around, and went back to his chair to continue eating chicken. I ran to my boss's office in a panic and told him everything that happened. Unlike last time, this time he did react, and I watched as he called the police from his cell phone. I must admit that at first I thought that maybe this was a publicity stunt by my boss, but I noticed in his eyes the fear for me. He was as terrified as I was. I continued working normally and heard the police arrive. I couldn't watch as they took him away because I was cleaning the bathrooms, but the boss told me that the problem had been solved. And that made me feel much calmer. Knowing that the man was probably not happy, I continued working normally until it was time to leave. My boss asked me to stay until the last minute, and I had accepted. At least I could leave the restaurant with him and not alone. And I admit I was still a little scared. When it was time to leave, I should have noticed all the danger signs, but I didn't. First, my boss didn't go out with me. He had told me a few minutes earlier that he had to leave urgently. I walked to the exit as I was locking up alone, and as soon as I closed the door, he was there. The man dressed as Colonel Sanders was standing in front of me. The only difference was that this time, he didn't have fried chicken. He had a knife. I ran as fast as I could to my car, but before I could get in, he put his hand on the door and wouldn't let me open it. This time, I had him face to face, staring at me with those horrible white contact lenses and that insane grin.
How the fuck you get away?
The man raised his knife, ready to cut me, when a shadow came out from behind him and pushed him.
Okay, good
It was my boss.
All right.
The two began to fight, and with one push, my boss escaped and got into my car with me. I accelerated the car as fast as I could, while Colonel Sanders just watched us. Out of danger, we both relaxed. I realized I didn't have my cell phone. I must have dropped it while running. I wanted to let my family know I was safe, so my boss lent me his cell phone. I was about to call, but something made me curious. How had this man escaped from the police?
That's what I said.
I went into my boss's call history, and I couldn't believe it. There was no 911 call. At that very moment, I began to question a lot of things. Why hadn't my boss called the police? Why did he leave me on that last shift?
That's what I said.
Why did he say he had to leave early if he was really there?
Exactly.
Why didn't Sanders chase us after we struggled with him?
For real.
At that moment, I realized that somehow my boss was involved in what was going on.
He was.
I turned and looked at him. He was staring at me, terrified.
Why are you terrified?
He noticed that I noticed. In a split second, he pulled the gun out of his pocket. But before he could do anything, I braked the car, and he flew out the window.
Oh, good shit.
After that, I accelerated the car as fast as I could. While from behind, he tried to shoot me without success. I never went back to that job, but I filed a report with the police as soon as I got home. That same day, they arrested both my boss with the exposed shooting at me on the street camera and the man disguised as Sanders. My boss never revealed his motives, but Sanders did. The man confessed to the police that he had been hired to give me the scare of my life, but he didn't hold back and tried to kill me, so my boss interceded.
Crazy.
Apparently, he wanted that KFC place to be famous for having a scary man surrounding it, and he wanted to use me to tell the story. He didn't mind me dying, but it would have gotten the restaurant shut down. Today, I am at the trial with him for attempted murder. I didn't have to resign from KFC until a year later, as he was fired the moment I filed the complaint. During that last injury, I was calmer, but I must admit, I was very afraid. I would always ask someone to walk me to the car, just in case that scary man decided to come back.
They actually arrested now. Like I said, how the hell...
Have you ever worked at a fast food place? I haven't, but a friend of mine used to work at KFC. He worked in the front booth taking the orders. So every weekend, a few friends of mine and myself would go to this particular KFC to support our friend. This KFC had been there for a few years, so even when our friend Zach wasn't working there, we visited this fast food restaurant to grab a quick bite. However, we didn't know any of the staff except for Zach. One day after his shift, Zach came straight to my house where we were having a boys' night. He brought a few burgers, fries, cokes, and some other food with him. Josh, one of my friends, had just arrived before Zach from his mechanic shop. He was super hungry, so he was the first one to start eating the food. The moment Josh took a bite, he made a weird face.
Hey, Zach, why does this burger taste different, man? Is the meat old or something?
What? No, man, I saw the cooks open a fresh bag of meat right before I placed the order.
Really? Because these taste funny. Try it, guys.
We all ate the burgers.
We all tried it.
They did taste a bit different.
Spit it out.
Not in a bad way, but just a bit chewy. Nevertheless, we boys didn't mind a little bit of taste difference, and we ate the food anyways, and got back to our video games. A few days later, when we visited the KFC, there were cops parked outside the restaurant, and all the staff was being interrogated by the cops. We entered the restaurant, and only one girl was at the order counter, and a single cook was inside. The rest of the staff was speaking with the cops. So I asked her what the matter was, and why were the cops there? She told me that one of the cook's wife was missing for a week. The wife's sister filed a complaint, and the cops were here for the investigation. They wanted to talk to them about the cook's wife who went missing. That night, we were having a cookout in one of our friends' backyards, and Zach arrived there after his shift. Hey, Zach, what was that all about? Why were the cops in your restaurant? There was a cook named Mario. He looks literally like a real-life Mario, with that bushy mustache and all. He's a little weird, you know. Never really talks to anyone much. He does his work and leaves. Never interacts with the other staff beyond what's necessary. We all thought he might be one of those broody types, so we too kept some distance from him. Until last week, when he didn't come into work for 3 days straight. The manager tried to get in contact with him, but it was to no avail. When he showed up on the 4th day, he was acting in the same way. No explanation for his disappearance. The manager didn't bother either. Until today, when an entire task force showed up at our doorstep asking about Mario. They say his wife disappeared around the same time Mario was absent from work. They suspect him to be behind the disappearance. No one clearly knows what happened to his wife, and the cops didn't tell us much. They just asked us about Mario and his behavior at work, and we told them what we knew. If you ask me, I think his wife might have left him. I mean, look at the guy. He looks boring and is a weirdo. Who'd want to marry that guy in the first place? We all made some jokes about the incident and continued our cookout. Suddenly, while eating the burger, Zach said to Josh, "Hey dude, forgot to tell you that day you complained about the taste of the burger. Turns out, some more customers were complaining about that weird taste too. Maybe the meat sent by the company wasn't that great. Nevertheless, just wanted to let you know."
Yeah, man, no problem. Not the first time I've eaten some bad meat,
Josh replied, laughing. And that was it. A few weeks later, a news article was sent by one of my friends on our WhatsApp group. That article was about a missing woman whose bones were found in a trash pit near the local KFC. Now, this article didn't have names or any details. It was just a big article about how could the bones of a woman who was missing for over a month get into a place like that. I don't know why, but I had a suspicion. A weird feeling in my bones after reading that article. So instead of waiting for further news, I called Zach. "Hey man, what's up?" "Hey Zach, do you have some time to talk?" "Yeah man, what happened?" "So, remember you told us about a weird cook, Mario, whose wife was missing on the day of our cookout?" "Yep, I remember." There was a sudden edge to Zach's voice, as if there was some information he didn't want to share or was trying very hard not to spill. But I continued as if I didn't notice. "You saw the news article that's on our WhatsApp group about the missing woman's bones, right? You know anything about it?" He left a long breath on the other side of the line, like he was about to tell me something he was trying to hold in. "You remember the time when I got the burgers from KFC, and Josh said they were weird?" "Yeah, I do. What about it?" "Yeah, so the cops visited the KFC a couple of times, and once they came with dogs, and that's when they found the bones. But the crazy part is the investigation that followed. The cops had a suspicion that Mario was behind all this, but they had no clue what they were about to find. Mario and his wife had a big fight, and she threatened to leave him. The dude couldn't bear the thought and stabbed her with a knife 38 times. The sad part is he didn't stop at that. He chopped her body into pieces, took all the bones and wrapped them in a trash bag. That's when he took the 3-day leave. He froze her body parts. When he returned to the job, he dumped the bones in the trash bin. But the next thing he did was truly horrifying.
Fed everybody.
He put the frozen bags of his wife's body in our meat freezer, and then used her as meat in our burgers. By then, Zach was gagging himself just thinking about it. Is that why Josh was complaining about the taste? Yeah, and not just him. Almost over 100 people ate that woman, thinking it was their regular burger patty. God, truly disgusting shit. Now the cops haven't made this information public in order to not freak the people out, but the staff knows about it. We were asked by the cops to check if there were any more bags full of her body parts, Please don't tell this to anyone, especially Josh. We're trying to keep this as low as possible. I don't want anyone to freak.
I'm telling Josh.
Yeah, man. That's okay.
Josh
Later that month, the whole story was out, and Mario was convicted of murder and other charges. But now, every time I go to KFC or any other fast food restaurant, all I can think about is if the meat is chicken, beef, or am I being fed a human?
During the winter of 2015, widespread manifestations and protests erupted near my home in Portland, Oregon. I'd completed 3 semesters in Portland University, and already I was used to these kinds of congregations. I admired their passion and drive, though this time the multitude was protesting my work of employment, KFC.
Yep,
I drove into the parking lot for my day shift, unable to find a spot because of the bustling scene that had developed. A large crowd with megaphones and large cardboard signs stood around the restaurant, chanting rhythmic jingles and slogans. "Fried chicken is murder," one sign read. A man wearing a ludicrously large Colonel Sanders outfit held a large banner that read, "KFC, Kentucky Fried Cruelty." He chanted loudly, advocating and promoting a vegan diet. I exited my car, slightly annoyed, lowered my head and walked towards the door. Immediately, a group crowded me, shouting obscenities and cramming flyers to my face. As a petite female, I feared for my safety. I pushed people away and screamed firmly, "Look, I just work here. I don't even like fried chicken. I just need the work to continue school." Most weren't satisfied with my statement, but as the crowd hesitated momentarily, I rushed inside. The shift was generally slow. Not many customers were willing to face the mob that stood between them and a bucket of chicken. By sundown, our restaurant closed, and most of the protesters left. I finished my cleaning duties, locked up, and headed for my car. A few stragglers chanted something at me, but I waved them off dismissively. On the windshield of my car were pamphlets, flyers, and pictures of cute baby chicks with the caption, "Friends, not food." I tossed them in my car and drove off, ready for a night full of homework. Usually protest around here lasts a few days, a week or 2 at most, but not this time. The Colonel had struck a chord with this group, and they seemed to grow more relentless every passing. Their crowds grew and their chants loudened. Every day, the trip from my car to the restaurant grew in annoyance. The crowding and chanting I encountered during their first day grew into shoves and obscenities. The flyers and pictures of baby chicks evolved to threatening pamphlets. Everything culminated on the 3rd week of this manifestation, when leaving work a trio of protesters, each wearing chicken head masks, poured a bucket of red liquid on my car. I instantly called the police, but by the time they arrived, the culprits had fled. As they ran, they screamed back at me, "Blood for blood, how do you like it?" Their voices grew softer with the distance. "Fuck you," I screamed at them. Things continued to worsen. The chanted obscenities became death threats. When I heard someone yell as I entered the restaurant, "Only with blood will they understand," I knew it was time. I marched straight into my manager's office and told him I didn't feel safe, and I would not be coming in until the situation cooled off.
Exactly.
He agreed, apologized, and gave me time off. The next day, I was leaving campus after an afternoon of homework. I unlocked my car, sat down, and turned the ignition, only to notice something on the hood of my car. I got out. Along the front bumper, a row of 5 rubber chickens were taped together. A note was attached to the beak of one of them. "We know who you are." That's all it said. I tried to dismiss it, though it was difficult to accept that I was being targeted, even outside of work. I drove home, shaken up, arrived and decided to take my mind off of things with some television. But as I went to my apartment door, a note was taped over the peephole. "We also know where you live."
No.
Shit. Should I call the cops again? They weren't helpful the first time. Why would they be now?
Now they're at your house.
I
girl.
entered, but secretly clutched the pepper spray I had hidden in my purse at the beginning of this fiasco. I entered and was greeted to the sight of my apartment completely ravaged. It was as if a hurricane had passed straight through. My couches were knocked over. My coffee table was upside down. Glass from my picture frames was spread throughout the floor. Shreds of my throw-over blanket were scattered like ribbon. Papers and documents were in piles on the ground. But the worst sight was a layer of red liquid covered every surface of the apartment. I stood shocked at what I was seeing when the door clicked closed behind me. I jumped back and crashed into a large figure. The man wore black and a large novelty chicken mask. He grabbed me and restrained me easily and covered my mouth. He turned me towards the wreckage that was the apartment and gave a signal. From behind the knocked-over couch, 2 more figures arose, leaving their hiding spot. One wore a pig mask, the other wore a cow mask. The man that was restraining me said close to my ear. I muffled something over his hand that covered my mouth. He grew more agitated with every word. The 2 standing in the kitchen nodded, their animal masks agreeing with their brethren. Something close clicked near my ear. I tried to turn my head, but the man easily restrained me. He pulled a switchblade close to my face. He placed it flat against my face, the cold surface sending chills down my body. He moved it throughout slowly. He asked blankly. His last 3 words exploded in my ear. He flipped the knife and drew it close to my neck. I felt the sharp steel touch my skin. Pain erupted from my body as he began to pierce my skin. A warm sensation began to trickle down my neck, and I knew instantly blood had been drawn. Suddenly, the man's grip ceased. It became entirely limp. The knife fell to the ground with a loud thud. Seconds later, his body fell straight down like a tower being demolished. I stared down and saw his body convulsing and thrashing wildly. Came a voice behind me. The 2 spectators in masks made a run for it, but soon 3 policemen were chasing them. They were also tased like their leader. A 4th cop touched my shoulder softly. At the police department, an investigator explained that other KFC employees had experienced similar break-ins. I simply hadn't heard because I hadn't been to work. After the 3rd one, cops were dispatched to all employee residences. They arrived in mine just in time. I didn't work at KFC much longer. After this incident, the trauma was simply too much to bear, and continued to work in a place that had almost killed me. I will forever be thankful to the police officers, and I will forever be more vigilant of protesters and manifestations, because you never know who may be targeting you specifically.
All this protesting over some damn chicken. Over some damn chicken.